So it's not typical that I open up the residence council meeting because it's not administration's meeting, it's the council's. But Susie asked me to do it this time just to officially welcome the council, new members and returning members into 2022. And thank you for the continued partnership. And I've been very expressive about this, how the partnership through the council leadership over the years has grown tremendously, and how we've become such better partners through communicating and working together and planning meetings, and it's just become such a better and better experience for both administration and I think the council itself. And we're able to get a lot more done as a community together. And so I really do appreciate how far we've come and how much farther we can go this coming year. And I look forward to working with the new council, all the members, and the Residents Association to make our community a better place to live and work. So welcome, Happy New Year, and let's get going. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Well, welcome to the first Residents Council meeting of 2022. And thank you for being here. We know this is an awkward time to socialize this way, but thank you for being here. This council's role and its committee role is to be the voice of our community. It is to enhance our comfort, it is to enhance our well-being, and it is to fulfill our social and intellectual needs. In other words, this council is here to help, assist, enrich our lives at Whitney Center. We are very fortunate to have a very supportive administration. Peggy, Ken Sandberg, Mark Van Barros. They truly listen to us. They care about our comments, about our suggestions, and they act on them, and they act on them promptly. So this has made our cooperation a joy to do, and hopefully very, very strong. If any of you have any questions regarding how we can help you, or we can help your neighbor, simply reach out to anyone of this committee. You can call us on the phone, you can email us, or you can simply stop us on Main Street and we'll talk. We will listen, we will try to help, because everybody's voice does matter, and you're going to be hearing this a lot. The list of our new committee is posted on the bulletin board, but this is the best time to introduce our new members. Lynn Hawkins, Vice President. Lucy Ambach, Secretary. And Nancy Rosenbaum, Assistant Secretary. Our wonderful Phyllis is with us as a member of the committee this year. A few thank you are due. Maria La Sala, who is not here, unfortunately. I did want to thank her for all the wonderful spiritual programs that she has organized for us over the year. Peggy Joyce, for always keeping us informed in a very timely manner and complete manner. And Thomas Hudson, for the bountiful meals that he provided this year at Christmas and New Year. So this is in the past now. Turning to 2022, the first question that we have is for Mike. It is, due to the shortage of staff and the resurgence of COVID and Omicron, what are the changes in services that we can expect in the short term?
So I think that's a really good question, because we're asking the same question of ourselves, administration that is. What how has the Omicron resurgence of COVID affected our staffing, and what do we do to accommodate the services that, that we still need to deliver? So the one word that I would have you hold on to is flexibility. It is important that we remain as flexible as possible with an open mind, because what we don't want to do is scale back all the services sort of across the board. We don't feel that that's necessary, because there are adjustments, and Peggy will address some of these, I think, in her COVID update. There are adjustments to how we can staff through this latest resurgence in terms of vaccination status and booster status and all of these things. So we have, and the CDC and Department of Health have adjusted some of that guidance, so we can have staff come back sooner than later and so on. It is a very fluid dynamic, and so we have a number of staff that are out, but some are out potentially for 5 days because they've been exposed, but they don't have any symptoms, or they don't test positive. Some are 7 days, some are 10 days, so we're constantly moving back and forth. It seems, and I know Peggy won't say this, but I'll say it because we don't want to say we're through it, but we seem to have plateaued a little bit, hit a little bit of a plateau in terms of the numbers of new cases among staff. Nonetheless, what our goal is to minimize the impact to the degree possible to all the services that we provide. So a good example is that we went to a buffet dinner in the bistro because of the staffing impact. And that allows us to keep the bistro open, to keep all the venues open, right, without shutting them down completely, but we just have to scale back on the services that we provide. And it's that approach that we're going to use as necessary to manage the ebb and flow of the staffing during this resurgence and any future resurgence that might occur. And so our goal is not to scale back across the board on shutting down anything, but rather adjust the level of service according to the staffing that we have. And so I urge you to pay attention to the communication that comes out regarding that. Our primary means of communication is email. We have well over 160 residents with email address, and we supplement that with memos, with written memos that we also provide. For those who don't have email, we'll make sure you get it. But please do pay attention, and sometimes those communiques are dense, they're packed with a lot of information. We will make it a goal to minimize the amount of information and really just highlight topically the most important pieces. So that's going to be the key to maintaining flexibility, and we'll communicate that as we see things ebb and flow.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you, Mike. Peggy, we're going to have the same question for you, but in terms of clinical services.
Sure. Nice to be here with all of you. So again, like Mike said, do pay attention to the memos that come out. We're going to be doing those weekly, and it does give you updated information, especially any hot topics that might be happening on the campus. A few residents came and asked me if I could highlight the important things. Everything on that memo is important, so do look at them. Sometimes you're so accustomed to getting memos, you think, oh, just another COVID memo, but we do try to keep you current and up to date. It's important that you're all in the know, and that's what we hope to gain from those memos. So I'll give you a quick overview. Nothing really has changed. We had a great weekend between Friday and today. We only had one team member test positive. That's huge for us because we were getting multiple people every day. So like Mike said, I don't want to say we're doing better because we know how this works. It could change at any moment, but we only had one since Friday, so that's really good news for us. We send out on the memo, we tell you how many additional people that have tested positive. We don't do it cumulative. I had a few residents ask me that question over the weekend because cumulative, it would be near impossible because I know the first time when you got that first memo that said 20 team members probably was a huge shock. But as time goes by, the CDC and the health department, the Connecticut Department of Health, they do allow staff to come back much quicker. They also allow some staff to continue to work if they're exposed. Obviously, if they have COVID, they have to be out 7 days. But because of them being exposed by probably someone in their household, they don't have to stay out any longer as long as they have no symptoms. They're totally asymptomatic, no fevers, no respiratory distress, and they are fully vaccinated with a booster. So we're now getting some liberties because I think we're trying to learn a little bit of how to work with COVID. In the beginning, we didn't know enough to know how to handle it, so that's why everything closed down. But now we know, 2 years into this, we're pretty smart, knowing what the next step should be. We've had 2 years of practice, so even with this surge, it hasn't really affected us tremendously, except for the workforce. Good news is people that are vaccinated and boosted, like just about everybody here, we're finding very little symptoms. As you know, we did have a handful of residents. We had a total of 5, but one person was in the health center. They did so well, they were discharged home because they were there for short-term rehab. So of the 4 residents that we have, they're all doing great. Again, they're all boosted, fully vaccinated individuals. What we're seeing is a lot of cold-like symptoms, runny nose, sniffles, not even a lot of fevers, not a lot of elevated fever. So this one is acting very different. It's milder, especially those of you that are vaccinated and boosted, but it's highly contagious. And that's why the numbers are so high. In the beginning when this all hit us, it actually started on Christmas Eve day, where the numbers just kept going and going and going, and we thought we'd never see an end. We're finally past Christmas and New Year's, so we're seeing that kind of level out to some degree. The other thing that the governor has implemented is they are now mandating, like they did originally, all healthcare providers, which is our entire campus, because we are considered a managed residential community, all of the staff must receive their boosters. So originally they mandated the 2 vaccines or the 1 Johnson & Johnson. They're now mandating that all of the staff here get the booster, 3rd shot of the Pfizer or Moderna vaccines. We have to have everybody finished by February 11th. So we'll be holding our own clinics here, just like we did when all of you got your 3rd shots. We'll be doing that ourselves, and we'll have regular clinics over the next several weeks so that we will be in compliance with the February 11th deadline. Any questions on vaccinations itself, Phyllis?
What happens if they don't get the 3rd shot by February?
So just like the first 2, people were allowed to request a religious or a medical exemption. We did have a few employees that did ask for those exemptions. They were reviewed by a higher source than me, and they were either approved or declined. I'm assuming if you took your first 2 shots, you're not suddenly going to ask for an exemption because obviously you believe in vaccinations. So it'll probably be the same people that will just get the exemption for the booster, the 3rd shot as well. But we're like 97% vaccinated. Lucy?
Are you aware the state does not seem to have a record of our first 2 vaccinations?
Use the mic, please.
Oh, sorry. Are you aware that the state does not seem to have a record of our first 2 vaccinations?
Yeah, so that's interesting. Someone has mentioned that to me. I haven't had a minute to follow up, but I'm glad you reminded me. So CVS actually did our 1st and 2nd vaccine. They were responsible to do all the paperwork. That was part of the partnership. I've got to just reach out to CVS to find out why that didn't happen. I actually went on to look for mine as well, because I received mine here and I'm not in there either. So obviously it's a CVS issue, so I'll try to resolve that for us soon. But we have copies of all your cards. We did make a copy in case you misplace it, lose it. So we definitely have proof for you if you need it. Community nursing can give you that. People have been asking about kind of more closure of the community, but I think Mike already said, I don't think we're in that situation. We know, we're smarter now, we know how to manage it better. So like restricting visitors, and I've said this many times, know who you're inviting in, because you're putting yourself at risk if you're inviting people in and you don't know their vaccination status, or you have someone that was just traveling around the world. You might want to wait on those visitors. You want to make sure the people that you're inviting in are safe as possible, because again, you're taking the risk on for the visit, but then if you become positive, we still have to do contact tracing, which means we have to reach out to the person to say, okay, who have you been with for the past 2 days? We have to go back 2 days from the time you're aware of an exposure or you're tested positive. So unfortunately, anybody that's identified as maybe having dinner with that person would then have to go on our exposure list, which is a bit of an inconvenience. You have to stay in your apartment for 5 days. You do have to monitor your temperature, and you do have to be tested. So we're trying to minimize that spread of the exposure. Unfortunately, there's no other way to do it, because we got to make sure now the person that you dined with that had the exposure needs to turn positive before you're at risk. A lot of people think, oh, I sat with somebody, so I'm going to get COVID. The person that was exposed by the person that was positive has to be positive first. We've not had anyone to date that has been with someone that had the exposure turn positive. We're not seeing that happen. Any questions on exposure, protocols, quarantine? I know if you remember back, everybody used to have to stay in their apartment for 14 days. It's now down to 5, which is a wonderful thing.
Okay,
Carol?
and I did start to ask, but I couldn't hear the answer. Is it possible? Closer. Whoops, wait a minute.
It's on.
It's on. Is it possible to notify people on a floor that someone is being quarantined because of an exposure? On our floors, we go in and out. We do know the people, and if we know somebody is maybe alone, or we haven't seen for a few days, right? It isn't unusual for us to knock at that door and say, is everything okay? I mean, we're only 13 residents on a floor, or rooms in apartments. So if somebody is in quarantine, is it so terrible to say there is somebody on quarantine on your floor, and then we might even be more cautious? Sure, we'd like to know who it is, but we understand your situation, particularly if somebody needs support in their everyday life, whether they are supervised by a spouse in a way, or dependent but not realizing they're dependent on a spouse, or whatever, they're failing in other ways. I think we had that on maybe our floor. And I can tell you that even though wearing a mask, it's still you would necessarily avoid, even with a mask. And
We cannot disclose where the person is, where they live, who they are. It's all violations of HIPAA. We have to protect privacy. The best thing to do if you have a neighbor and you haven't seen them in a while, right now with the surge of COVID, I know you all care very much about each other, is call the community nurse and say, hey, I haven't seen, can you check on them? And then the community nurse can get back and say, they're fine. Because again, we can't say we checked on them and they're positive COVID, so don't worry about them. But we can't disclose any of that information. So I would ask you, especially now, someday we will be rid of COVID. For now, especially during the surge, just rely on community nursing. They don't mind. They know you're concerned.
All right, then I'm going to take it a step further. If you know it, and you also know that this particular person has other problems where their memory, or particularly their memory, and they're maybe not able to observe your rules or our rules for self-confinement, can you take this person if they're in quarantine and have them be in your health center for the 3 or 4 days where you have an area for COVID positive tested people?
So there's a lot of questions in that one question.
I know.
The first thing is there's no skilled need for this particular variant. In order to come into the health center, a physician has to certify that you have a skilled need to observe someone, to make sure they may not wander out of an apartment or get into a place where they need more supervision, is not approved for a health center visit. They have to be in medical skilled need. So we can't just transfer people to watch them, which I understand you're concerned about them. It comes from a good place in your heart, I understand. But we have to be able to manage them in their apartment. Now, I will tell you, there is concern, but I think we're doing the best we can. If someone does contract COVID that may not be fully aware of their situation, we're doing the best we can to keep them confined to the apartment. But what we've put in place to reassure all of us that they're okay is we're doing daily testing on those people. So we took it one step. You only have to test people once a week, but we're doing daily testing if we really can't keep someone in their apartment. So if somebody should change to positive or they are positive, we at least know right away.
Thank you very much.
And nursing is very involved with those residents that are positive COVID.
Thank you.
Sure.
So if I could just add a little bit, as a policy, you all have the right and the freedom to let your neighbors know whatever you wish to let them know. It's not our prerogative, frankly, to do that. And we will not do that on behalf of anyone because that's not our role. So, if you as a group of residents on a floor or a friend group want to agree to do that, that's up to you. We have nothing to do with that. We will not impose anything on anyone as a move to here or a move to there because we don't have a right to do that. You are independently living people who are self-determining and can make these choices. I would recommend, contrary to Peg, and I don't often contradict her, I try not to, rather than calling community health, call your neighbor. If you haven't seen them, call them. I wouldn't go knocking at the door because you don't know, especially while our infection rates are up, right? But call them. Reach out to them. Then if you don't hear from them, right, you may just actually let resident services know that, that it's, because it's not automatically assumed that it's a healthcare issue. So I would just use common sense and reach out to one another. But I want to disabuse the whole community of the notion that administration, clinical services or otherwise, is in the role of mediator or advocate or representative of any particular resident. We are not, unless we are assigned to do so, and that is just in relationship with that resident and family. So that might not be what you want to hear, and I understand where it comes from. I really do. I appreciate the care and concern, but we have an obligation to the individual right and freedoms of everyone who lives here, and that's how we need to act from a policy perspective.
Thank you, Mike.
I appreciate Mike contradicting that one piece because I know community health services is maximized. We have some staff members out with COVID, so we're doing great, we're covering everything, we're not skipping a beat, but they're stretched, and I know that's why Mike said that. So yeah, if you can reach out, by all means, but yeah, I agree, don't go knocking on the doors. The other thing I've requested is, because we've seen some residents exposed in the dining rooms, that seems to be a kind of a place, because you take your masks off. And the way the guidance is written, if two of you are both masked, your risk for exposure is minimum to none. Unfortunately, you can't eat with your masks on. They haven't figured a way how to do that. I want to try to invent that somehow. Unfortunately, with your mask being off, you're at a much greater risk of being exposed. So I have asked with the senior teams, we all got feedback on it. We don't make decisions by ourselves. We definitely thought it was a good idea to really try to hold the dining venues to no more than 4 people at a table. Because again, you might have seen your son or daughter yesterday, they call you, and that night, you go to the dining room, the next day they call and say, Mom, I'm sorry to tell you, I just got a positive COVID result. We go back the 2 days, like I mentioned, anybody that was at that table is now exposed, and you have to go through the protocol that I mentioned. That's why we're also asking, if you're going out to visit with people or having people come to see you, please don't go to the common areas, especially the dining room, for 3 days, because this variant moves very quickly. So generally, if you have an exposure, you're going to hear about it within 3 days. Your family member is going to notify you pretty quickly. So just try to avoid those areas of public forum, just because you can spread any type of exposure risk to your fellow residents. I know it's not always possible, but if we can minimize it as best as we can.
Peggy, thank you very much. Does anyone have any questions for
I
Peggy?
think Esther has one.
One of the issues about eating in the dining venues and the wearing of the mask is that I notice that when people are entering these areas like center stage, they start taking off their mask as soon as they enter the room. The idea is to keep the mask on only when you are not eating, so that after you sometimes want to stay a little later, we need to put our masks back on. So that we have to realize that only when you're actually eating do you take the mask off.
Yeah, that's a great point, Mrs. Crystal. You should take it off when your food is being served to you and not before, and then as soon as you're done eating, put your mask back on. And then you can sit and enjoy each other's company. But again, unmasking creates the biggest risk.
Can I ask you what you mean by going out? Are you talking about going to the store?
No, I'm talking about family gatherings. You know, if you go to a little party, or even just a couple of people, one person, I would just be careful. Stores, again, the contact is 15 minutes or more in the course of a day. If you're going to the store, I doubt you're hanging with the cashier for 15 minutes. So it's pretty quick. Anything that's quick turnaround. Someone asked me about doctor's offices, if they had to quarantine. They follow COVID protocols, so you're generally very safe in a doctor's office. They're very careful. They screen you usually when you get there. So that's one place you don't have to be concerned about. Helena? Oh, sorry.
The governor wants nursing homes to take COVID patients.
Yep, and we would love to. So the question is, Department of Public Health is asking nursing homes to take COVID positive residents from the hospital. We think the 2 people that came to our health center were positive COVID when they left because they didn't get it from us, so we assumed. The problem is we can't take COVID positive people if we don't have staff to care for them. So we've told the Department of Health, they have a call every other Wednesday. They're begging nursing homes to take patients to the nursing homes because the hospitals are busting at the seams. That's why we really want to not send people to the hospital if we can avoid it. But unfortunately, you have to have appropriate staff to care for people. And that's why, one of the reasons why we actually decreased our census was because we really didn't have staffing for more than 33, 34 people. Lucy?
To go back to masking in the dining venues, one thing people need to probably be aware that if they're in the bistro and they're actually ordering food or going back, that they should have their mask on at that point.
Yes, yes, definitely. And, you know, one of the questions that was raised to me actually by Susie was like, how do you diplomatically tell someone that you live with, please put your mask on? It's hard. I mean, it's hard. I mean, it's easier for us to tell staff because they report into us. Your friends, your neighbors, it's hard. But we want to keep each other safe. And, you know, if you're comfortable, a gentle reminder, you know, please pull up your mask. You know, and again, to have a properly placed mask, it must cover your nose as well as your mouth. And I know it's difficult, but I do see people unmasked. I do see people without proper placement of the mask. But we need to all be good stewards of the community.
Peggy, thank you so much for your thoroughness in taking care of us. You've been absolutely wonderful.
Thank you.
And we're going to keep you talking a lot more in the near future.
No, I don't want to come up here anymore. This is my 2022 presentation. I'll see you all next year.
I'm going to ask Erwin to give us a very brief report on the budget because I don't think we've had a chance to spend anything yet.
I missed that. So the treasurer's report is that we're assembling the budget for this coming year. We finished the budget for last year. We ended up in the black. Everything was fine. And we had no problems, and I don't anticipate any for this year either, but we're putting it together at the moment.
That was brief. Esther, could you give us also a somewhat brief report on dining room activities or dining activities?
Thank you. Well, good news from the dining services. Susie, you asked for some information from me about the number of residents eating in Center Stage during the holidays. So Christmas Eve, there were 50. This is Center Stage. 50 for Christmas Eve, 62 for Christmas Day, New Year's Eve, 64.
Esther, hold my closer to you.
Is that better? Okay. New Year's Eve, 64, New Year's Day, 39. So what does it tell us? It tells us that with the number of residents here, some are eating elsewhere, some are eating in the pub or the bistro, some are ordering from the outside, some are doing their own cooking, some buying ingredients from the corner store, some having meals delivered to their apartments because of health needs, and some reluctance on residents to make reservations and to follow through on those reservations, to make reservations for, let's say, the Center Stage. The big drop of the resident eating was at Center Stage for New Year's Day, and that was related to the information we got relating to the fact that there was an uptick in the number of people contacting the Omicron variant. The number of meals have increased. It used to be between about 35 or 40, and now that number has increased, which means a more strain on the services of the dining services to provide people bringing the meals up to the apartments. The other piece of information, Susie, that you wanted was about the bistro. the bistro's open from 4 to 7. The dinner is from 5 to 7. That means between 4 and 5, you can't get a hot meal. And the grill and the oven are not available at this time. So I followed this yesterday to see what was happening. At the buffet, there were cold items. I'm just talking about dinner now. Cold items. So they had, you could have a tossed salad. You could have a tuna salad plate. You could have a chicken sandwich. And you could have some macaroni and cheese. Then for the hot buffet, there used to be just one choice you could have, but now there are 2 entrees that are hot. And it comes with 2 sides and soup. So we do all this, and we cope with all the inconveniences because we are understanding, we're flexible, and we're resilient. I can guarantee you one thing: no one is going to go hungry. So thank you.
Thank you, Esther, very much.
Can I inject a bit of humor?
Of course.
When it goes to the bistro at night,
Mike?
go to the bistro at night, and I ordered a tuna fish salad sandwich with tomato. And they said, "I'm sorry, we don't have tuna fish salad at night." I said, "What do you have with tuna fish?" "We have a hot tuna sandwich." I said, "Okay, may I have a hot tuna fish sandwich without the cheese, please, and the tomato?" And I got my tuna fish sandwich.
Any other questions? Okay, thank you again. We all know that COVID has curtailed many of our activities in the past couple of years. One of the activities that we used to be involved in was a relationship with CCRA, and its purpose is to represent the interest of the residents of continuing care communities. Lynn has been a lifetime member, and she can bring us up to date.
Yeah, I'm really delighted that I joined as a lifetime member because I've definitely lived beyond the annual membership fee, whatever that was. And in case you think it's just an association that, you know, meets together and talks about common problems, I made a copy of a booklet that the Connecticut CCRA puts out, and it was the passage of a CCRC Bill of Rights, of which this is a compilation. The actual bill, I couldn't resist printing one copy. The actual bill is all this. And I was going to read it until I saw that it was like 17 pages long, and I just pushed it aside. But a copy of the booklet that includes this Bill of Rights will be, with the library's permission, in the library with the council information so that you can look through it and see that it really is an association worth belonging to and being, as appropriate, active with. Now, the way I found out about the CCR-CONCRA, the Connecticut Continuing Care Residents Association, was through Leading Age. Leading Age, and I'm quoting from their spiel, the mission of Leading Age is to be the trusted voice for aging, and we are a member, not our association as much as our administration, of Leading Age. It is a business association, but the businesses are all nonprofits. And they have they have state meetings and they have a big annual national meeting. And there is a CCRA part of that national meeting. There's a day when the residents who go to the national meeting meet together and inform each other about the things that they're doing. And I have to tell you, we are amazing. Really, even just having the Residents Association, and maybe this is the most important thing about us, we have always, from the day we started, had a residents' council. It's had maybe a different name in the beginning if you thumb through the big books in the what we call the office attached to the library. But there's always been a voice of residents at Whitney Center, and that is not true of every CCRC. So anyway, look in the library for this. It's about, 20 pages, and it will be comb bound. If you know what that is, that thing that grips the pages. And I think that's all I need to say now, except if issues come up like another Bill of Rights type legislation, you'll hear about it.
Thank you very much, Lena. One of the reasons that I personally am interested in finding out more about CCRA is because I have the little mic here. Can you hear me now? Okay. I am interested in reconnecting our relationship because I want to be able to find out about sharing best practices. And Lynn already has told us that in terms of best practices, we are probably the best already. But it would be interesting to know what other communities such as ours do and how they implement some of the activities that we do. So we'll keep you posted. There's 2 meetings a year. Lynn and I will go to the first meeting, and if anything really interesting comes up, we'll let you know, because the more information we get, the better we are. So in order to keep this meeting short and to prevent more being closer together for very long, this will conclude this meeting. And I will thank you all for coming. Thank you.